we've been, we haven't had a meeting since the 1st of December, so quite a lot has been done. So just a quick recap of things that have been going on within Lake and Wildlife, and then the upcoming opportunities. And then our main program, which is how our wildlife survive the winter while we're packed in here with the heat on, eating donuts and drinking coffee. What's going on out there?
Good morning. Good morning. Well, I've been at Bentry for about 30 days now, and it has gone by very, very quick. My name is Jim Pryor. I am your new general manager. To tell you a little bit about myself, I grew up actually not too far away. I grew up in Peachtree Corners, Georgia, just down the road in Gwinnett County. I attended high school at Greater Atlanta Christian. I went to college at the University of North Carolina. I was fortunate enough to be a baseball player and got into school there. About a year in, I blew my elbow out, and that was before they created Tommy John surgery. So back in the day when you blew your knee or blew your elbow, they put you out to pasture and you were done. Now they can fix anything. So I was just 10 years too early in the process. But North Carolina was a blessing. I got a degree in business, and I met, my senior year, I met a beautiful lady from North Carolina, and she became my wife a year after college, and we're getting ready to celebrate 29-year anniversary of being married. We have 2 children. Well, our son is 23 years old. Our daughter's 21 years old. They're both graduates last spring at Shorter University. And my son's presently getting his MBA at Clemson, and my daughter works for Mohawk Industries in Calhoun. So it's nice to have them close to home. We're a tight-knit family. Both my kids, my son played baseball at Shorter. My daughter played lacrosse at Shorter. So I got to be that weekend parent where we traveled everywhere. My son went on 77 college visits, so I got to see a lot of campuses. So I like to travel around and see things. I got a master's degree from Appalachian State University, so that has created a love for being in the mountains and mountain life, and I've always been attracted to, later in my career, get back to the mountains, so here I am. Professionally, I've worked in college athletics, professional athletics, and athletics was always a dream of mine, but after working in those industries, I realized real quickly that you worked all the time, you never got to watch the games, and that kind of stunk. So I got out and I got into a profession that was absolutely meant for me, which was Parks and Recreation. And I spent 26 years in the Parks and Recreation industry. I was the director at 3 locations. I'm not a very stagnant person. I love challenges. I like taking on new places and new things and new people. So I have a career of moving every 7 years. They call it the 7-year itch, I guess. But at 30, I became a department head for a pretty good-sized city, and have worked in 2 counties since then, so have been in different agencies. One thing that I love in going into a new place is being a fresh set of eyes. I don't really do anything to personally satisfy me. I'm a consensus builder. I like dealing with people. I like evaluating things. I'm a strategic thinker. I like walking around the car 3 times and looking at it from every different angle before I buy it. And so that's the way I approach things. Bentry came up at a perfect time. I was looking for a new challenge, and I definitely have one here. But and I knew that walking in. The board was very transparent in our interviews. I was here for about 3 days before I came, so I got to see everything, talk to a lot of people, ask a lot of questions, so I knew exactly what I was getting into coming in. One thing I can tell you is I'm very objective, like I said, and I'm very strategic. I have a vast history of looking at operations and making things very, very efficient. A lot of times staff gets blamed for problems when it's not their fault. If the organization is not set up for staff to thrive, they can't do their job, and it just creates frustration after frustration. So I've had an opportunity here to look at all of our facilities, meet with our staff, and you have a very, very passionate and good staff here. You have some really, really good dedicated people that love you as residents and love Bentry and that have been here for a long time. And so I couldn't ask for better talent-wise to work with coming in. I do plan on giving the board a proposal to make some organizational changes. not cutting anybody out of a job or anything, but just kind of restructuring so we have a better flow of things. We can get some better operational plans, some better customer service, and possibly be more efficient how we do things. I love spending money, but I am very frugal. I am all about bang for buck. Something I hate doing is I hate trying to put Band-Aids on things and doing it the cheap way. I'd rather spend a little bit more money and do something that lasts for 30 years as to putting a patch on it where it's going to last about 2 years. So that's kind of my philosophy. I got spoiled a little bit in Forsyth County because I had like millions and millions of unlimited money there to do a lot of things. I know I don't have that here. But the thing is, there's a lot of needs. There's a lot of pressure on me to get some things done. What's funny is every general manager that you've had, they moved into the same office that I'm in, and each of them picked a file drawer and created their files. And nobody ever merged the files together. They all had their own files. So as I'm moving into the office and cleaning things out, I get a history lesson of each general manager and what happened. And the first 2 weeks here, I was feeling a lot of pressure with some things, but as I looked through the files, I realized that the same problems you're dealing with today are the same problems you had 20 years ago. And different people have tried different ways to change them. And so, my outlook on things is I've already realized that nobody in this community agrees on anything. I mean, we're people. So if you want to schedule a meeting with me and you need to come and you need to tell me what you need to get done, I'm probably not going to jump just to do it because I know the next person coming in my office isn't going to want to do what the person before me wanted to do. So know that when you come to meet me, if you want to come in and say hello, say hello. But anyway, if you just send me an email with an issue, I'll be glad to look at it. I can't promise you that I'm going to jump right on it. If it's feasible and fair and something that we've done wrong that we need to fix, we'll fix. But I'm going to create a lot of avenues to create some consensus here. We have a lot of problems, a lot of issues, and we have limited resources. So bang for buck says we need to prioritize what's most important in this community as a census as a whole, and that's where we need to put our money and start fixing some things. And over time, we'll get to where we need to get. I do have some preconceived notions as I walk in here. I'm common sense. There's probably over 100 people in this room. Did everybody get a parking spot where they wanted up here? No. This is one of our greatest amenities that we have here at Bentry. It's beautiful. There's a lot of elements here, but we don't have the ability to have 2 pools open, a tennis center open, a meeting in this room, a restaurant open, and have adequate parking and adequate access. So, that's one of the big challenges that we face here is scheduling things and organizing things. So what's going to happen in the future here is I've been looking for the first 30 days, looking and taking notes. I haven't said a whole lot. I've been at board meetings, listening to people. I've been talking to a lot of people. I've been talking to a lot of staff, and I've just been writing down questions and topics galore. And I'm in the process of putting together a needs assessment survey it's not going to be huge long, and I know everybody hates surveys and everything. This is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a written survey that's going to be sent to every homeowner in this neighborhood. And so you will have a way of answering the questions and giving your input, and you're going to be able to give us your honest feedback, and nobody's going to trash you for it. It's just going to be what you think, and it'll be a big way of building consensus. Since it goes to every household, every family has an opportunity to give their input. If you don't take advantage of it, you can't come back later and say, nobody asked me, because we're asking everybody. And this will be the most accurate information that we have in order to start building plans and building priorities for what we do. And so I look at putting that together over the next 2 months here, and hopefully sometime during the summer we'll be able to release that information, and we'll build from there. But I think that's the first step of identifying the priorities and starting a plan toward the future. So I'm glad to be here. Honestly, I have felt welcomed. There has been nobody that has been like mean to me or ugly to me. It has been very, very nice. I am a personable person. I'm a very positive person. When I wake up every day, that's the only choice you have in life to make is what kind of day is it going to be when you get out of bed. And I'm a positive person, and I make sure I only let positive things in. I'm not on social media. I specialize in minding my own business, and I love people that mind their own business. So I'm not on social media. You won't find me anywhere on social media. But what's funny, if somebody says anything about me, somebody always shares it with me. So, so anyway, I'm just not a social media fan. I just like dealing with reality and letting in the positives and being that positive person. And so working with the board and working with all of you, you might be mad at me, but I want to look at it in a positive way of, doing what's best for the Bent Tree community. Because I feel like that's my mission as your general manager, is to be practical, be fair, and do the best job I can and create the best community for all of you and the investment you made. So thank you very much. I appreciate all your support.
Thanks, Jim. Awesome. I hope you guys are as excited as I am. And before I forget, I wanted to acknowledge, so where is Judy? Judy and I are both, and maybe we have more, going to be first-time grandmas coming up in the next period of time, and the Holers, right? So it's incredible. So just wanted to say that. Congratulations. And to me, yes. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to go through this real quickly because I know that we haven't met for quite some time, but I wanted everybody who maybe hasn't been involved in some of these activities to realize that Lake and Wildlife and our volunteers have not been hibernating. We have been busy on the trails. We've been working on the Chestnut Cove trail system. The third trail up there has been blazed. Or flagged anyway, and blazing to come. The signs and the parking are in progress. We hope by the end of March, I believe, is a time frame, and that's been some fits and starts there, but we're going to get that parking lot done up and get that open for access with all the signage and maps and such up on Chestnut Cove. That'll be our longest and most remote trail here in Bent Tree. At Sally Doss, we've had some trees taken down, one partially by a beaver and the rest that we took down, and one that was leaning over the bridge to make sure it didn't fall on anybody. And we've planted a native stream garden around where the stream restoration is. And I'll tell you, if you go look at it right now, it doesn't look like much. Looks like some sticks and but come the spring, I have high hopes for that native stream garden. So I'll bring that to you when and if it begins to thrive. And remember, native plants take a while to get established. But we'll have something beautiful there. The fishery improvement plan has been initiated, and I wanted Huff is going to share a little bit. Huff, you ready? Come on up, and he's going to tell you a little bit about what's been going on, because that plan is a big priority. And he's got some visual aids to share.
Just briefly, I'm going to just give you a little summary of what we're doing and why we're doing it, because we have so many new people here. A number of years ago, there was a study done on the lake fishery, and the fish were shocked, which is just temporary, and they go back down again. And the study showed that the fish were in fair condition. There was somewhat of an adequate population. Well, that was 5 years ago. And then last spring, we shocked the lake again. A professional group came in that manages lakes, mountain lakes particularly, and found out that the fish population has gone down substantially. What fish are left in the lake were very thin and very undernourished and small. And because there's no food, the reason being is that many years ago, say about 10, I think, thousands of grass carp were put in the lake for good reason, because there was a grass and weed problem on the surface of the lake. Well, they're very, very efficient. As it turns out, they denuded really all the grass and habitat on the bottom of the lake that fish and little fish and fry can hide. And the reproductive cycle of bait fish and game fish were interrupted. So we have initiated and started a program to bring the fishing back to the lake. and we're doing it in a number of different ways. One way is to create habitat. There is, if you'll notice over here, this is just one small branch of a tree that will be going in the lake. And interestingly enough, when I was researching the different types of fish habitat, there are a lot of plastics and so forth, and I'm an anti-plastic kind of guy. I found this company that makes these habitat structures out of vegetable-based plastic with no toxins. So that's a y'all come up and after the meeting, take a look at that and feel it, and it feels like plastic, but it comes from vegetables actually, and it's very environmentally friendly. We have 3 different types of habitat structures we're putting in the lake. One is looks like a cage. If you've ever seen a crab pot, it looks like that, and very small holes, and inside we have bushes like that growing up or attached. And the little fry, once they're born from the brim beds, can then go into there and save themselves from being eaten by a larger fish and develop into the reproductive cycle that you're looking for a healthy fishery. We also have some that are semi-shallow water, 4 to 6 feet, and then we have some that are 7 to 10 feet. And if you feel like coming by the boat landing, perhaps after the meeting today, you can see all the structures that we have that are being built. We've got some good volunteers. Art Tippett, of course, he's always a volunteer, and he's helped a lot. We've got Kevin O'Brien here helping. We've got Gerald Hunter here helping. A lot of people have helped put together the structures. What is a pile of habitat structures came in one little pallet like that. So it was, I told someone the other day it was like putting Barbie's dream house back together again. So anyhow, it's almost all put together. Kevin O'Brien is nice enough to let us use his big pontoon boat, and we're going to use that. Gerald's going to help us identify where the brim beds are. So we've got a lot of help with the Lake and Stream Committee, and so we're excited about that. The good news is this: not one penny of bent tree money has been spent on any habitat structure so far. It's all been from private donations. So I'm really pleased to tell you that, as well as we've got some feeders that are going on the 3 docks, the dock at the boat landing, Sally Doss, and the Beach Pavilion dock. And those feeders will be set so that they feed early in the morning, late in the afternoon. And what I anticipate and hoping for is that children can go on that dock and catch a brim or bluegill and enjoy fishing. And that's the whole purpose of what we're doing. This spring, sometime March or April, we're going to be stocking 50,000 bluegill, and they're going to be 4 to 5 inches. At the same time, to keep the bass from harassing the bluegill, we're going to be feeding supplemental crawfish and a threadfin shad. So that keeps the bass happy, keeps them fed away from the bluegill. The following year, if the board agrees, step 2 of the process is to do the same thing, but it'll be bass, northern bass that we'll be stocking, and we'll supplement again with crawfish and threadfin shad. Threadfin shad and crawfish have a reproductive cycle, and I'm hoping that will also, with the habitat structure, create a food source as well as the feeders that are going to be on the docks. We also have a number of people that live on the lake that have agreed to adopt a feeder. And so that at one time we'll probably have 12 or so feeders on the lake feeding the pelleted food and creating that cycle of growth and health for the fish. So it's quite a progress that we've made so far. We'll be putting them in the water perhaps as early as next week when we get some temperate weather that I can get my volunteers together. So anyhow, that's where we are with that, and I want to thank everybody that's been involved. Particularly want to thank the board for their support, and thank the volunteers who donated money to try to get this to the point where we are today.
You might want to tell them about the
Oh, I'm sorry. Gerald had mentioned something to me. We're going to mark every habitat structure with a decoy, a duck decoy, so that if you're out on the lake and you're fishing, you know where that habitat structure is. You can fish around it and identify exactly where it is. And we've got weights. We've had people that have contributed. Tony and her husband contributed a huge weight that we're going to use to weight down some of the structures. We have someone else who's contributed 30 bricks. I've scrounged around and got some concrete blocks. June Bug, I don't know if that's a real name or not, but June contributed some concrete blocks. So we've had a lot of support for the effort, and I'm pleased to say that it's coming into fruition, and thanks to everybody for their support.
Great. Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Seth. Okay. Also, what we've done, the December and January chemical monitoring for streams has happened. Thank you, Mason, Brian, Vassar, and anybody else who participated in that. And I want to brag a little bit on the Bent Tree Stream Keepers. We've been nominated for the Upper Etowah River something, I'm not sure of the whole organizational thing, but anyway, Excellence in Data Award. So it would be the second award that the stream keepers have gotten through the Georgia Adopt a Stream program, and large thanks to Brian and his consistency and attention to detail in making sure that happens. So a lot of good information coming in on our streams and lake through the monitoring program. And Keep Bent Tree Beautiful, we did all the seasonal planning, and the freeze was rough. I know everybody's struggling with all those bushes with no leaves, and it's hard to wait to the spring and hope they come back right. But it did a number on a lot of the seasonal planting beds as well. But the holiday decor got taken down, so Keep Bent Tree Beautiful has continued to be active. Any of the other team leads for Lake and Wildlife, anything I'm missing that that was done in December, January that we might want to highlight? Okay, so what we have coming up, we have the hanging basket sale, which I mentioned. So pick up an order form, and there's an order place online as well. You can see that in Friday News and off the website. And I just want to mention the new nature club we have starting this afternoon, and that's Barb Collier. Barbara, raise your hand. Barbara's in the back, and she introduced herself. So she is a mom in the community through a partnership with the Bent Tree Activities Committee and Bent Tree Families. This is a nature explorer club that we're going to start, and just try to get the kids in a consistent opportunity. So it'll be first Saturday, same day as Lake and Wildlife, at 1 o'clock at the Nature Center. We'll have programs for the little ones. So if you have children, grandchildren who are up, Barbara will be here. You can talk to her about it, and hopefully we'll get some traction on starting that new club. We'll have a trail work day, Saturday, March 11th. So Mason's here, right? Mason, raise your hand. Everybody look back. Mason Holland is raise your hand again. There's Mason. Find him if you're interested in learning about helping maintain our trails. We're going to have a work day, so put that on your calendars for March 11th in the morning. We'll be spreading mulch, picking up limbs. We're going to do a little bit of rerouting of the trail at Sally Dawes. So it's there's something for everybody to do. Showing up in the morning, depending on how many people show up, we divide in teams and maybe send people to some of our other trails. And so if you can help out there, that'd be great. We'll continue with the implementation of the lake plan as Huff was describing. So if you're interested in knowing more about that and getting engaged, talk to Huff here. We'll be doing the February chemicals and macroinvertebrates. That's a deeper level of monitoring. So anybody who's interested in knowing more about Adopt a Stream or our Stream Keepers program, talk to Brian. Brian, raise your hand. Brian over here. If you don't know him, or you can ask me about that as well. And it's Powerline Cleanup time. Art, you want to talk about that now, or we'll be sending out emails, or what do you think?
I've already sent out emails to the team captains from last year. We're always looking for some new people who would be willing to help. We divided this entry into 18 different areas. And we have people, when they're walking their dogs or just doing walks, taking their clippers along with them and cutting down small pines. It's time to do it again this year. And we'd like anyone who's interested to come see me so I can reorganize my chart for this year. It'd be great to have the help. What we're doing is it keeps the power company from spraying poison. And so last year they did not spray any. And so Dar did a good job getting it all organized. Thank you, Dar.
Yeah, that's right. It's exciting to see the vegetation that's coming back up, but we did take on the responsibility of maintaining some degree of maintenance of the small trees that are under the power lines. So it's a good time of year to do it. The snakes are not out yet. The vegetation hasn't grown back, so it's not nearly as intimidating to get on there in the roadsides and cut the trees that would grow up and cause a problem. As you know, there's a lot of big trees that cause problems with power lines on a continual basis. So this is kind of a forward-thinking look. It's not we're not doing anything about those big trees, but maybe the next generation isn't growing there. Question?
No, just a comment. I wanted to thank everybody who donated Christmas decor. We were overwhelmed. We got 8 truckloads of things taken to Kathy's house. We start our regular donations the first Friday in March, and it'll run through the first Friday in May. So if you have any new or like new items you no longer need, please bring them right out here to the drive-through between 10:30 and 11:30.
Right. And if you're not familiar, that's for Tamarack Treasures, which is our has turned out to be a phenomenal fundraiser and a whole lot of fun. So we need donations, and if you're interested in becoming involved to help, it's a really fun group. Talk to Marietta about that. Okay, so now we are going to I'm going to figure out how to make all of this work. We're going to talk about into our main program. Before I jump into this, is there any other Lake and Wildlife leadership comments? Anything we've missed? Okay, let's go. So I'm going to talk to you today about how the wildlife survived the winter. So this isn't rocket science here, probably nothing new on this slide. There's some general strategies that animals use. They go where the resources are, right? So that might mean going south or wherever there's more food, more warmth, more habitat for them. They store calories, so they bulk up. We kind of do that to Thanksgiving, Christmas. I mean, we're not so happy with it, but we do that as well going into the winter. It's kind of a natural thing. They conserve the calories that they do have, so trying not to burn them off so quickly because you need those resources to get you through until the warm weather comes and the new vegetation comes in. And then they need to stay warm enough. So these are some of the sort of general categories of things that happen to get through the winter. This is about migration. These birds here, sure, how convenient. When life gets hard, you guys don't give a darn about the community and you just set off to the beach. And these are but we're migratory birds, right? I mean, we have people who do that. When first gets cold, they're packing the car, man. They're headed south, they're going. We have some of those. I find it interesting. Just like people, the birds are the same in that their definition of what's north and what's south changes. You have some people from here who go to Florida, some people from New York who might come here and call that. My aunt, I grew up in Savannah, and she calls, I hope I don't offend anybody by this, she calls some people halfbacks. Y'all know what a halfback is? She said it's a Yankee who went down to Florida and they only went halfway back. So they ended up sort of like in North Georgia or North Carolina, there's halfbacks. So no offense to my northern friends. But that's what animals do that when they migrate. They just get out of town. They head for warmer weather. They go where the food is. And just like, people, their definition of how far south is south enough can differ. Our summer birds, tanagers and wood thrush, they nest here right? In the spring and summer, this is their habitat. And then they go south in the fall. They may go down to Florida. They may go down to Central America. And then we have other birds, our winter birds that nest further north, and then they may come here. They may just pass through, or they may stay here if it's mild weather. Sparrows and finches and ducks. So they migrate to here and they migrate from here, just depending on the species. But migration doesn't always mean a long journey. Black bears are considered migratory. Sometimes young males can especially roam 100 miles to find more resources, to find a territory, and that's also a migration. So animals move to go where the resources are. Now, this is something I wanted to explain because there's a lot of confusion, and there's a lot of confusion in even trying to read about it. Hibernation, and when you read about animals hibernating, the term gets used, in general articles, real loosely. The definition of hibernation, and you'll read about bears hibernating, but if you read the detail, they're probably talking about grizzly bears, maybe, or they're talking about bears in Alaska hibernating, or in the Rocky Mountains. So hibernation is really a chemical thing that happens. It's triggered by a chemical that's called hibernation induction trigger, and it's a change in the body. It's reduced daylight, and the falling temperatures activate that, and it's a much deeper sleep. Animals can hibernate for weeks or months. It's measured in those time periods. It does involve a change in the metabolism, low respiration, low body temperature. But more often than true hibernation is something that's called torpor, which is like hibernation light. It has the same characteristics in that it is a lowered heart rate, lower respiration, conserves energy because your metabolism slows down. But it's basically like a deep sleep, and it's measured in terms of hours or days, not in terms of weeks or months. So these terms get used interchangeably, and most people just you'll read things that use the term hibernation when really they mean torpor. And most of the animals around here, our black bears, use the torpor for energy conservation. Most animals do utilize some form of energy conservation. This is a queen bumblebee here in the ground. They nest in the ground. The ones that in North Georgia or around here that truly hibernate are our groundhogs, woodchucks, whistle pigs, whatever you call them. Groundhogs hibernate. Some species of bats and queen bumblebees are examples of animals that truly hibernate here in North Georgia. Many animals, though, around, they'll utilize torpor frequently from overnight or periods of storms and bad weather. They'll just take long winter naps. They go into torpor. Black bears, birds, chipmunks, raccoons, skunks, lots of things. And so we often get people who are new to Bentry. It's like, I thought the bears were going to disappear for the winter. Why do I still see them? So that's because they don't really hibernate. This is a groundhog nest, or burrow, den, whatever you want to call it. I think we have one on the hill, the end of Grandview Trail, past our house, and we've named him Hoagie. And we see him out there, and he's been hibernating. They truly hibernate, but the dens in the hillside are quite extensive. When groundhogs hibernate, their heartbeat goes down to as low as 5 beats a minute, and they breathe only once every 4 minutes. Their body temperature drops to about 40 degrees, so just above freezing. So their metabolism is really, really low, right? So they're not burning a lot of energy. And through the course of the winter, they do this for months on end. They lose about 30% of their body weight. They can. Their burrows are used by other animals through the course of the winter. While this is the groundhog down here, you see a skunk, which is probably only staying there maybe overnight or for a couple days. That skunk is taking advantage of the burrow. There's some garter snakes there that have curled up all together. in their version of hibernation, which we'll talk about, and the rabbit's using the hole to get away from that fox. So the groundhog burrows are used by other animals during the winter to help them survive. So ectotherms, the cold-blooded animals, they have a version of hibernation. It's called brumation, and it's a little bit different, but it's the way that they conserve energy. Snakes, turtles, frogs, they can't regulate their body temperature, so they surround themselves with material that doesn't fluctuate as much as air does. Air temperature goes up and down pretty readily, so they bury themselves in mud or water, under leaves, holes in the ground, because that medium doesn't change temperature as often. So that's how they protect themselves. And their metabolism drops very low. It's almost like a state of suspended animation. And they can stay there, turtles, 100 days under the water, even on iced over ponds. I mean, we don't have that too much here. But a lot of people will find them. If you find buried turtles in your yard, you may think they're dead because they are so, they're in this state of brumation and they can't appear dead, frogs and snakes. Turtles, they get oxygen from the water. And they have a very unique tissue. I'll leave it to you to go look it up. It's interesting. It's got a lot of vessels in the water, and it's around their rear ends. So some people say turtles breathe through their butts, which they do in a way. They take water out of they take oxygen out of the water through tissue around their rear ends. So that's one of the ways they survive underwater. So, and it's a really interesting tissue. I'd started to go into it, but it's just too strange. So y'all go look it up. Insects have their form of hibernation. It's called diapause, and it's more of a state of suspended development. So they kind of freeze wherever in the developmental cycle they are by species. It could be eggs, they could be larvae, they could be adults, but they just kind of stop right there through the course of the winter, and then they pick it up again in the spring. And that's what insects do. Some insects have a chemical called glycerol, and it keeps their bodies from freezing. So they would be ice crystals within their blood if they didn't have this, but it keeps this kind of an antifreeze that they make in their bodies that keeps them from freezing. Another thing that animals do is storing calories. They eat up. Hyperphagia. It's something that kicks in the fall, and it's just this natural thing that tells them, you got to eat, man. They go and they just go at it like crazy. They start packing in the food and packing on the pounds in preparation. It increases their fat stores, and they create what's called brown fat, which is a special kind of fat that, as it's converted to fuel during the course of winter, it releases heat better than others, so it creates a little bit of heat for them while it's being burned. And even insects, and I've never seen a fat butterfly or a fat ladybug. I don't know what that would really look like, but supposedly they increase their body fat up to 125%, even insects, to help them on their, like the monarchs as they migrate. Another hoarding food or storing up calories, gray squirrels, they're what are called scatter hoarders. So they don't put all of their nuts and berries and whatever they may gather in one place. They scatter it around their habitat in nests and trees and in the ground. As opposed to chipmunks, for example, which are called larder hoarders, and they kind of keep everything in one, like their pantry. They keep it in one place. And I guess there's pros and cons to either way of doing it. Like with the squirrels, you see them, it kind of seems random the way they put and they bury things around. But scientists have been trying to study if there's a pattern to it. How do they remember where they put it? Some people believe that they just re-forage in the same areas, and they kind of know, well, here's where I would have put it. So I think that's what we do in our house, right? You can't find something. Where would I have put that? So that's what the squirrels are doing out there when looks like they're randomly digging around trying to find things. So those are the chipmunks and the squirrels are kind of our standard poster children, right, for hoarding. But other animals hoard as well. This is a mole. And one of the things that they hoard is earthworms. And to get the earthworms to stay, they injure them. So they kind of bite them in the head and around their bodies. So the earthworm's not dead, so it stays fresh. But it can't go anywhere because it's injured. And they've found up to 300 earthworms in a hole, and they're just there for the mole to enjoy through the winter, so they don't have to go and look for it. And shrews do the same thing with insect larvae. They paralyze them, so they're just kind of stuck there until it's their turn to be dinner. So other animals hoard food in ways besides the cute chipmunks and squirrels. Not nearly as cute, but it happens. So one of the things that, we can ask ourselves is, well, should we feed them? We feel bad for them, right? You're inside and they're out there and, you've just made scrambled eggs and bacon and there they are, in the yard. Should we feed them? And the answer generally is no, we should not. Because when we feed wildlife, it causes them to congregate unnaturally in places, and that has its own set of problems, right? It brings diseases. It causes aggression and competition over food. So the wildlife then fight with each other, spend energy fighting over the food sources. They travel, they become habituated to that, and they travel to the food source. And that uses energy that probably was better spent in other ways. And then pets or predators get to know where the food sources are, where the congregation is, and that can end badly. So generally, we should not feed. It also teaches animals, we should never teach the wild animals to rely on human food, because that's a habituated behavior, particularly with the bears, that can't be undone. So not a good idea. Except, what about the birds? That's the one exception, right? Everybody loves to feed the birds. And this is more of a debatable topic. You have many of the same issues because your bird feeders, underneath the bird feeders, it brings mice and squirrels and other mammals. So even though you're not intending to feed those other animals underneath your bird feeders, that's what happens. I would be run out of Bentry to say, if anybody, we ever tried to say we're not allowed to feed birds, that's, we enjoy it and guilty sometimes of feeding the birds. But, always think about that. Use high quality food. If you do, keep water out there. And a better way than the bird feeders and seeds is to plant native plants and have shrubs. Plant them and leave them. If you're thinking about taking vegetation out, shrubs out, make sure you know what you're removing and what habitat it provides and what food sources it provides to the wildlife, because maybe you'll have second thoughts about cutting something down. So I'm not going to say don't feed the birds, but just be aware of what's happening, pay attention, move your feeders around, keep them clean. And maybe do, like I know some people who put small amounts of food out, like every morning in some sort of a pan feeder. So you put a handful out, and then when it's done, it's done. It's not a feeder that's just, hanging up all the time. So, and that's more of a compromise, limited amount. So other strategies that birds use, they fluff up their feathers. You may see them if they look, they don't tend to put on weight because then that inhibits their flying, but they will, so they look a little chubbier in the winter. They're fluffing up. They keep, it makes insulation and keeps the warm air next to their bodies when they fluff up their feathers. And they cover up their feet. They can lose heat through their feet. So you may see them standing on one foot and tuck one up and keep it warm and then do the other. Or they kind of shimmy down and cover up their feet like this mourning dove is. He's got his feet tucked up underneath his fluffed up feathers to stay warm. So that's one way they keep warm. They huddle together to stay warm. So some bluebirds huddle together. The term is kleptothermy. So I don't think they're really stealing the heat, but they're sharing the heat. So that's a term that's used to describe what they're doing when they huddle together in groups in cavities in trees or along a tree branch to stay warm together. Birds also cache seeds under tree bark. So you'll see birds, if you see them at your feeder and they come and they take and they come and they take and they come and they take, and you're like, they can't possibly be eating all this. Is it really that many different birds? Well, maybe they're taking it and caching it and they hide it in an area. And again, it's the same as with the squirrels. It's scientists aren't really sure if they actually have the capacity to remember where they put all these seeds, or if they just have a general area and they go back and reforage and then tend to find them again. Birds also enter torpor, which is that they'll have periods of time where they seem lethargic and they're just conserving energy. They go into a deep sleep, sort of waiting for time to pass, really, until the spring comes. This is a hummingbird who is in a state of torpor, hanging upside down from a feeder. And people think that they look really strange. You may see birds hanging from trees or leaning against trees, and they seem like they're ill, but they could just be in a state of torpor. Their metabolism slows. For hummingbirds, with their quick metabolism, this is a really important part of their survival. Staying warm. Deer, one of the things, and we see them up and active, and it's hard not to sometimes, in the snow and the sleet, really freezing cold days, but they have quite a winter coat that helps them. They have 2 layers of fur. The under fur, it's a soft, fluffy layer that's next to the skin that holds warmth to the skin, that's guarded by a taller layer that has what's called guard hairs, or hollow. They're not really hollow like a straw is hollow, but more like a honeycomb, and they repel water. There's oil glands that make them waterproof. So their coat that they grow in the winter, they have a different coat in the winter. In the summer, the winter coat is really warm and creates a great amount of insulation for the deer. So while we couldn't be out there, when we see them out there, they're not freezing. Animals use safe spaces. They need safe spaces because when they're in a state of torpor, they're lethargic and they're not alert, right? So where they curl up to take that long winter's nap needs to be safe and hidden. Our natural ecosystem provides these places. It's under leaves, it's under logs, it's in holes in trees, holes in snags. Standing dead trees are really important because they are have a lot of holes in them where animals can hide, in the tops of the trees and the crooks of the trees, all of the places that the animals can curl up to stay warm and wait out a storm or in the evening. So I want to shout out to one of my favorites, the opossum. The opossum is an animal that's one of the least equipped to deal with winter. They migrated up. They came from Central America, and they just haven't much adapted over the 800,000 years or however long people think they came up this way. They don't store food. They don't cache food. They don't use torpor. They don't grow a winter coat. So they have to continue to forage. You'll see them active more in the daytime in the winter. And some people think that means they have rabies or they're sick or, but it's not. It's just that they have to continue. They're not a rabies vector species. So they move shelter frequently. They line their place with grass. That's about all they do to try to survive the winter. Their tails and their ears are subject to frostbite. So be kind to the opossums. If you see them out in the winter, they're just trying to make it too. And they don't have a lot of adaptive techniques, so don't make it harder on them. Let's see. One of the things that I found very interesting in doing this research is understanding that when you start life in the spring, the earlier in the spring babies are born, the more likely they are to be ready for the next winter. So things have evolved to keep that cycle going through the seasons. And so animals have different techniques to ensure that their babies are born early in the spring so that they're have the best chance of being mature and ready for the winter. And so this is a timeline. I don't know if you can see it. This is like May. So this is really into the spring and everything is warm. We have deer babies being born in May, squirrel babies being ready to go in May, and the black bears coming out in May. And yet their reproductive cycles started way differently, but all targeted toward having those babies born in the spring so that they're ready for the next year. The black bears, for example, they mate the year before, and they have delayed implantation, so the mama bears have the capacity to be pregnant, but they don't actually start to develop those babies unless they're healthy and they have enough food going into the fall. And if their bodies are strong and they have the energy reserves, then they will continue in their pregnancy through the fall with the black bear cubs born in the den in the winter. And then they're ready to come out with mom. They'll grow in the den and come out with mom in the spring, as opposed to the deer in the middle. The deer's mate in the fall, and they're pregnant all through the winter, but babies are born in the spring. The squirrels don't mate until late in the winter, shorter gestation cycle, and then they're born in the spring. So all of the reproductive cycles are all leaning toward being born in the spring so that you're ready for the winter. Because a lot of what animals do through the whole year is being able to survive the winter, because it's hard for them. So another thing we can do, I just want to point out, help your pets. Be considerate. The dogs don't know, right? So this is a raccoon that may have curled up beside a planter on your deck, right? And may be in a state of torpor. The wild animals may not be able to defend themselves. They're not as alert. They're lethargic, and they may be in more danger from your pets. If a dog is chasing them or a cat is outside, and there's less cover for them to hide in, right? And they can't afford the energy running away from dogs if the deer have to constantly stay on the run from one part of the community to the next, to the next, to the next, because they're constantly being chased by dogs. I think that's hard on them. They lose their energy that they really don't have to spare. And that's so keeping animals in a fence or on a leash, keeping cats inside, I think that's really important to help the animals have the best chance of survival. And so I'll leave you with this. We really need to understand their strategies, understand they've adapted to the woods. They've been surviving for longer than we've been here, right? So we step back, we let them, let their instincts take over, let them do what they do. We leave the safe spaces for them. Realize that the standing dead trees, if they're not a danger, leave them, because they provide the habitat for the animals to live in. Brush piles, leaf litter, it's important to the animals. We need to focus on planting the habitat, protecting the habitat with native plants that provide the berries and the cover for them to use. And remember that wildlife populations need to be in balance with the habitat that can support them, right? So going through the winter and some wildlife loss is normal. It's part of the nature's way of, keeping it all moving forward. And our best way of supporting the wildlife is supporting the habitat that they live in. So I'm going to leave it at that, and thanks for your attention. All right, I think we are done. Any other announcements? Anything? Questions? Any questions? All right, thank you. Make sure you put your chairs up. Good.